Hello, my name is Roberta Silman, and I have actually been here before to talk about an earlier book, Summer Lightning, which was a novel. Now I'm back with a new book, a collection of short stories called Heartwork, my second collection of stories. And what I really would like to do today, since I spoke a lot about myself during the session we did about Summer Lightning, I'd like to just talk a little bit about the short story and what it means to me and why I started by writing short stories, and then read you a story from Heartwork called Bed and Breakfast. I think the short story has a very unique place in American literature, and especially among the women who write fiction. Most of us start out with short stories because a lot of us have children and families, and a story is something you can kind of hold in your head a lot more easily than a novel. You can see the end of a story, so you can take a few weeks, write very intensely, and then, catch up a little bit after the story is finished. At least that's what I did, and I started in the late 60s, early 70s writing stories, and my first story was actually published in the New Yorker. It was called A Bad Baby. And then I wrote a lot more stories and published that first collection, and only a year or two after that, the Blood Relations was published in 1977, so in 1979 I published my first novel. And there have been several novels since then, which are here displayed, but I've always written short stories as well, even when I was working on the novels. And in a crazy way, there was no doubt, sometimes the material came to me as a novel, and sometimes it came to me as a short story. So, as I say, I've been writing short stories all through, and I've been lucky enough to be published in places like the New Yorker and the Atlantic and Red Book and McCall's when those magazines existed, and Mademoiselle. And then later I have published several stories in the American Scholar, the Virginia Quarterly Review, and the Atlantic, which had published some of my earlier work as well. So even though a lot of the mass magazines have disappeared, the quarterlies have still continued to publish short stories, so there's still an outlet for stories. And there are even magazines online that are now publishing stories like Narrative. So one feels that, when you finish a story, it isn't like, well, what am I going to do with this? You can always find or try to find an outlet or a place that will publish it, even if it's just digitally or online. So I think I mentioned this when I was here earlier, but I'll just mention it again. I was lucky enough to decide to get my MFA, and since I lived in Westchester, not far from Sarah Lawrence, that's where I went to get it. And my teacher was a very great short story writer called Grace Paley, and she was the one who helped me figure out how to write the best story you could write. And I will only tell you that it's because of Grace that I now know that before I write a short story, I usually start out and write down everything I know about the characters, and then I put that aside, and then I start to write the short story. But if I know all about those characters, I don't have to indulge in a lot of description or explanation in the story. I just can get to telling the story. And that was wonderful advice that Grace gave me, and I've adhered to it ever since. So now let me read my Berkshire story, which is called Bed and Breakfast, and it was written in a rush. It just came to me during COVID. I know poets say that poems come to them unexpectedly, and I think stories also come unexpectedly. I'm not sure novels do. I think they need a lot more reflection. But this story just kind of appeared when the pandemic began, and I thought it's worth telling. So here it is, Bed and Breakfast. When she was a child, they told her not to talk to strangers, never to go into a stranger's car, and to call one of her parents if a stranger rang the doorbell. Now, at almost 70, her life depends on strangers. You're no better than Blanche Dubois, Vera tells herself as she wanders from room to room each Thursday after the girls from town have left and the major cleaning is done. No, I don't make the beds and clean the john, she's told her kids, but I do like to arrange the flowers and straighten the books and magazines, even leave some homemade banana bread near the coffee maker. Warm it up a bit. They're paying plenty, and what I'm giving them has to be something more like home. What she didn't tell them, 3 girls, all married with children of their own and all in New England, is how much she likes doing it. She always loved having guests. When she and Gil were expecting friends, her heart would sometimes race with anticipation as she figured out where everyone would sleep and what she would serve, and if she had time to bake anything special. So this is not so far-fetched. It's what she does well and can do for as long as she likes and can stop doing in a flash. There are no retirement laws for bed and breakfasts. When Gil died, she was sure she would go to a condo or a townhouse to be near other people, hear the rhythm of their lives through the walls or open windows. But after Shiva and the first few months when her daughters came as often as they could, she'd had enough. What she craved now was the ability to hear her own thoughts, the freedom of solitude, and the possibility of playing the piano whenever she pleased. No, I don't think you can play the piano at 10 p.m., the kind real estate agent confessed with a rueful smile. This was a year after Gil's death. For as soon as the unveiling was over, Vera made an appointment with the best real estate people in town. Just give it a chance, Mom. Just see what's out there, the kids had said. So she went, wearing a proper suit and heels, and for what seemed like centuries, she and the broker wandered in and out of new dwellings that were tucked in the most unlikely and often beautiful places. They remind me of really nice college dormitories, the woman said, and there is safety in numbers, even if some of these people are really quite elderly. People are certainly living longer these days, some very interesting, though, filled with energy and ideas. Still, the broker hesitated. Some are also quite frail and set in their ways, so no, I don't think they'd appreciate the sound of the piano after about 9. That was that, then. She was not going to give up playing in the evening, which she had started to do after the children left for college. Gil would listen while he marked his papers or read, and then in that last year he would simply stretch out on the chaise in the living room and watch her. Once he said, "It comforts me to know that you'll be doing that after I'm gone, that these pieces will still exist because you can bring them to life so beautifully. Music is like the trees and the grass and the houses. It outlasts people just like they do." When he said it, it seemed one of the basic premises of life. But when he was dying, he understood it. And by then she couldn't contradict him, because it was clear that the end was near and there was not a damn thing either of them could do about it. Still, when she remembers that conversation, she could hear a new sense of wonder in his voice. The wonder of dying, But what about her own astonishment after he died, that without him these things, music, nature, the buildings, the paintings in the museums they often walked in, didn't matter nearly as much as they once did, that his presence gave them an added dimension, and that even some of these pieces he loved sometimes sounded flat to her ears now that he was gone. Habits, though, are strong, and she needs to play the piano before bed. So no, she decided after that exhausting day with the broker she would not sell the house. She would stay put and wait until the time was right. The time came in the fall of 2019. Have strangers in your house? In this crazy world we live in, you must be out of your mind to take such a risk. Not only the children, but her friends and relatives pounced with what seemed an almost sadistic delight. Vera hated the certainty in their shrill voices, which was really disdain that such an intelligent woman, a woman who had taught French for years in the local high school and was an accomplished pianist, would sink so low as to advertise and exchange her marvelous hospitality for filthy lucre. It wasn't as if Gil hadn't left her perfectly comfortable. "Why, Vera, I'm surprised at you," her best friend Millie chided, "to stoop to something so common, for lack of a better word. The last thing you need is inviting strangers into your house, especially with all those beautiful things you've acquired over the years." Millie was never anything but truthful, just like Vera's daughters. But when Vera replied, "The only really valuable thing in this house is the piano, and it's pretty hard to walk out with a Steinway on a Sunday evening and put it into your car," Millie had nothing to say. So that was the end of that. And then, "A house needs to be used, just like a piano, and I want to stay in the house, and this way, with the extra cash, I don't have to worry if the roof needs to be replaced or the garage doors goes. It will give me a generous house fund, more than I need." Thus she began. Each week she slept in a different room and kept a precise list of what each bedroom needed. Behind her back, her families and friends called her obstinate and headstrong, what she had been called all her life. What had sometimes hurt when she heard it, but now that she was older and Gil was gone, it didn't matter a whit. As the weeks passed, it became clear. She would transform her home into a bed and breakfast. The season would start in May and go through leaf season, which sometimes lasted into mid-November. The red-winged blackbird, she decided to name it, for the birds that came in droves each spring. And if there were people who wanted it for Thanksgiving and Christmas, she might do that too. The holidays were always such a mishmash, deciding where to go, which grandchildren to see, everyone wanting her and no one wanting her. Besides, she had always loved cooking a turkey. Having the holiday smells drift through the house made her feel young and useful again. In October of 2019, a little more than 2 years after Gil's death, Vera advertised for a student to help her set up a website, and soon she was corresponding with many of her clients on mail. "You're amazing, Mom," Carolyn said. The very next day, her first request for an extended stay comes by email. His name is Silman Lang. He needs to get to know the area, will come for a few fairly long stays, which will entail some arrangements about meals. "It's complicated. I'll explain when I get there," he says. Silman Lang. His name reminds her of the 3 chords like bells in the beginning of her favorite Chopin prelude. 3 bells, symbols of the Trinity, her piano teacher said, reminding Vera that for Chopin, music had a religious dimension, just as it did for Chopin's beloved hero, Bach. He is tall and almost bald, but very erect. Older than she, but she has no idea how much. She's never been good on guessing age. He lived by himself in Harrison, north of Manhattan, in the same house he and his wife had thrived in for 40 years, and then for 2 years after her death. Now his children, a daughter in Arlington, Vermont, and a son in Williamstown, want him near them. The usual story he tells Vera over tea. It's hot, unusually hot for October, and the sun is still strong when she brings the tray onto the porch, and he stands up a little embarrassed to be waited on. A civilized custom, tea, he observes. Vera explains, we ate late, my husband and I, and when we got home from school we would have tea. We were school teachers, or I was. Gil was a professor at Williams, and the days began very early, and tea gave us a chance to catch our breath a little. Then Gil would do chores while I made dinner, and by 8 o'clock we felt more human. Teaching is strange work, hard to leave behind if you're devoted. Iced or hot? He takes his tea hot with lemon, and when she offers him a scone, he shakes his head and says he might indulge later. Vera relaxes. Here is a man who understands the importance of tea. Then she tells him it is almost an hour to Williamstown and at least 2 hours into Vermont, and he nods and tells her he likes the Berkshires and doesn't want to be 5 minutes from anyone. And I can get to Manhattan quite easily. Helene and I have friends and an assortment of cousins who spend time in New York, a fact my children seem to forget. They mean well, and there is something to be said for being close to family as you get older, but there is also something to be said for being with people your own age, he says. Vera nods, more to herself than to him, but when she looks up, he is frowning. You're not old enough to feel that, he says gently. Why, you're still a baby. Then his surprise when she says, I'm 69, and after Gil died, I regretted taking early retirement. Not because I missed the French or the kids so much, but because I missed my colleagues. I understand completely, he says. She continues, you do know that there's a senior center here and a very active synagogue, and a lot of people have sold their suburban homes and have settled here full time. And there are some beautiful condo complexes with activities and lectures. Finally, her voice dwindles. He waits with a question in his eyes. So she decides she might as well tell him the whole story. I thought I might want to sell the house and looked at several condos, and they are nice and new and very convenient. But I play the piano often at night, and when I asked about it, the broker said I might annoy my neighbors, so that's when I decided I'd better stay put. I love the piano. My favorite cousin was a pianist, he says. And Vera thinks he's going to tell her more, but he stops, and they concentrate on arrangements for meals. They decide that Silman will eat with Vera on Monday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and use the kitchen to cook himself something on Tuesday and Sunday nights. They even agree on a price, which seems exorbitant to Vera, but he insists. On Friday and Saturday he will be out, probably with his kids for the weekends, but the point is not to spend too much time with them. The point is to see if this is where I might like to live, he says firmly. That's why it will take time, and I must admit that I find the whole prospect a little scary. Vera reminds him there'll be tea every afternoon. That's part of the deal. His relief is obvious, and now he leans forward and helps himself to a scone. And as she watches him break off pieces and nibble them slowly, Vera breathes more easily. And after she observes how meticulously he brushes the crumbs from his knit shirt in a gesture so reminiscent of Gil, she is so astonished that she feels tears welling at the back of her throat. Tea time. Isn't 4 o'clock too late for golf, Dad? David's voice drifts through the large, airy room. His son David, who always talks too loud on the phone, now wants him to come after lunch on Friday for the weekend. Besides, we can play golf here. It's hillier up here, the course is more interesting, and we could get tea time a lot earlier than 4. Ben, when did you take up golf? I'm not talking about golf. I'm talking about tea. You know, English tea and scones, the custom of tea. We have it every afternoon, and it's pleasant and interesting. There are several guests here, and we talk about politics. Silman lies. I didn't know Vera Schoenfeld was English. She doesn't sound English, David says. She isn't. She just serves tea. You don't have to be English to serve tea, or Russian to eat borscht, or Italian to eat pasta, etc. At that, Silman catches himself. His kids hate it when he says, etc. They claim it's a cop-out and gives him away as a businessman instead of a professional. He can't remember when Helene informed him of that little gem, and now as he recalls her face when she told him, he wonders if perhaps she made it up, that perhaps his saying, etc., was merely another thing that bothered her, along with the fact that he was in the furniture business instead of a lawyer or a doctor or even an accountant, as so many of her friends' husbands were. Oh, now I get it, David is saying. Well, if you want tea, I'm sure Nancy will give you tea. We have a great little boutique here that specializes in coffees and teas, but I think it would be better if you plan to come earlier in the day so you can see the kids before it's the witching hour and they get cranky. After all, they haven't seen you since Passover, Easter. That's a long time. A weariness has seeped into David's voice, and suddenly Silman can feel himself soften. His son has plenty to deal with, a professional wife, a nanny, 3 small children, too many students, and millions of papers to grade, it sometimes sounds to Silman. The marriage is mixed, which has to be an added strain, and it is always so touching for him to hear David give each holiday its due so scrupulously. Christmas was always Christmas, Hanukkah, and Passover was always Passover, Easter. There was no equivalent to the Jewish high holidays, so only Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur were allowed to stand alone. But they are over for this year, thank God. During the rest of October and into November, Silman establishes a nice rhythm in Vera's house, out by 9 in the morning when he gets a second cup of coffee at Fuel in the village, and reads the New York Times, smiling to himself when he hears one regular say, "There was a time when all I did was take the elevator down to the lobby and walk a block for the morning paper, and now I have to drive 7 miles. But the man chuckles, and soon they begin to talk, and before you know it, they are meeting every weekday and having that second cup of coffee together. His name is Cy, and he is a retired doctor, and he tells Silman about all the volunteer possibilities that are in the area, and also that he and a bunch of guys ski at Butternut whenever they can. The runs are easy, good for old men like us." Silman shakes his head. He's done a little cross-country skiing, but his sport is swimming, and he's already investigated the pool at the new senior center. "But first I have to have a place to live," he explains to Cy and some other new friends. After telling them about his kids in Williamstown in southern Vermont, and that he is renting a room at Vera's bed and breakfast until he makes a decision. Eyebrows fly up. Vera? Vera is renting rooms? Vera Schoenfeld? He nods, tucking in his chin because he doesn't want to be questioned further. They seem to understand and simply murmur, "Well, the house is certainly big enough, gorgeous views, an attractive woman, that Vera." Then they decide he must explore the condo colonies where they live. 12 Oaks, Cranwell, White Pines, or even October Mountain, although that's a bit far. So before he knows it, he's in the car with a rental agent, and when he comes back to Vera's for tea each afternoon, he is weary and vaguely unsettled. "There's no place I can really see living," he says. Vera looks at him thoughtfully. "Have you considered getting an apartment on Main Street? I used to think I would grow old being able to walk to the post office and the morning paper. Obviously, it didn't work out, but there's something to be said for it." "There's also something to be said for this marvelous view," Silman replies, and they settle down to the business of tea, because now there are a few more guests, and Vera isn't entirely his. But he can still observe her lovely hands as they pour, the same hands that play those beautiful Chopin mazurkas she is working on these days, and the last movement of Schubert's Sonata 959. "I hope you don't mind that I play it over and over again," she said after he was here for only a few days. "No," he protested the next morning at breakfast. "I could listen to it forever." I started it after Gil died, Vera explained. Somehow Schubert was easier to get back into than Beethoven. Now, after a few weeks, she has insisted on playing her CD of Schubert's Quintet in C. Isn't it beautiful, she asks him, her face glowing with pleasure at the music. Then, what did you listen to at the end? So he finally reveals that Helene could never admit that she was terminal, that she kept calling her lung cancer acid reflux, and that she believed she was going to get well until the night before she died. But by then we weren't listening to anything, Silman says, and when he sees the sympathy in Vera's eyes, he decides to tell her how humiliating it was to have to pretend because Helene was so terrified of dying. It was a dance of deceit, he goes on. That's not my expression. I got it from a piece I read about some famous English poet who also couldn't face his own death. Helene's fear diminished both of us. He shakes his head. Not a good way to end either one's life or one's marriage. After that, they are easier with each other, no better where they are. The way you felt, Vera realizes, when you went to play tennis and the lines were newly chalked. She also realizes that she likes Silman very much. They are becoming friends, and now that he has decided to sell his house in Westchester and has actually signed a contract for a condo, she finds herself daydreaming about going to Tanglewood with him, or eating on the terrace at Cafe Lucia, even wearing a dress, something she thought she would never do again. She likes that he has established a routine with his kids. He goes away every weekend, but when he comes back to the red-winged blackbird, he tells her how relieved he is to have a place to return to, which pleases her and makes her feel proud that she had the courage to go ahead with the idea of a bed and breakfast. But she is careful not to talk about Silman to her daughters, and she knows from the way he describes his visits to David and his daughter Susan that he rarely mentions her. His house in Westchester sells much faster than anticipated, and the plan is to close on that house in March and move into the condo here in the Berkshires in May. You'll be a busy man putting your stuff in storage and then moving, Vera tells Silman as she recommends a young couple who can help him. No, he assures her, I'm not taking anything from the house except the paintings and the books and the personal effects. The furniture is too large for the condo, the wrong scale, and the young couple who are buying the house are interested in a lot of it, so I think I will start almost from scratch. The plan is to move in with a bed and a kitchen table and chairs and an easy chair and his beloved hi-fi and a TV, and then furnish the rest of the condo after he has lived there for a while. By now, they are in early March, making plans on the phone for him to spend the next 6 weeks at Vera's. As she listens to his calm voice laying it all out, Vera frowns. He doesn't seem to be taking the national news seriously enough. With this maniac in the house, and when she mentions it, Silman brushes it off. With this maniac in the White House, there's no knowing the truth about anything, let alone this strange virus. As she listens to his calm voice laying it all out, Vera frowns. He doesn't seem to be taking the national news seriously enough, and when she mentions it, Silman brushes it off, saying, with this maniac in the White House, there's no knowing the truth about anything, let alone this strange virus. He is wrong. When he arrives on March 15th, the truth has come out, and there's talk of a lockdown, and by the time the weekend is over, it is clear that COVID-19 will be ruling their lives for the duration. Silman's move will be postponed, and no weekends with the kids, and no trips to Fuel every morning, no luncheons, which had only recently begun with Cy and the other friends. No opera at the Meharry on Saturday afternoons for Vera, no dinners out with Millie, no Tanglewood or Jacob's Pillow or theater to look forward to this summer. They shrug when they talk about it, and when their children call with panic in their voices, it is up to each of them to reassure those kids that they will be fine. that they will form their own pod, and thank God the house is big enough that they can keep out of each other's way. Vera will have to call all those people who made reservations to visit their kids for Passover and Easter and tell them to stay home. So they will be back to tea for two, the way they were at the beginning of this adventure when Silman was her first and only guest. And I will do the marketing since I'm younger, Vera says. He shakes his head. We will go together. They allow 2 people from a household at a time, he insists. So once a week they put on their masks and go to Guido's and Big Y, and for the first time since she started the bed and breakfast, Vera is seen around town with a man in tow. She knows people are making assumptions. Millie giggles whenever she asks about Silman, and she has seen acquaintances look at them with surprise when they are checking out at the store or stop at the post office. Surprise and then a sly nod, which annoys the hell out of her, but there is no help for it. People will be people. She doesn't have to pay attention. She didn't pay attention to the women who kept asking in the months after Gil died when she was going to take off her wedding ring. Never, she replied, and she doesn't care what they think now. The weather helps. The young women who revived Gil's vegetable garden the first year after his death come back and plant. Vera works in her perennial gardens in the afternoons while Silman usually reads. Gil taught history, and Silman is working his way through everything about Teddy Roosevelt. Wonderful to have all these books at hand and long stretches of time to read. Something I haven't done since college, he says. And then they talk about McCullough's Mornings on Horseback, which Vera loves too. And when she brings in the peonies, which are spectacular this year, and arranges them in vases throughout the house, and breathes in their very special aura, she realizes she is happier than she has been since Gil got sick. Even though COVID-19 is wreaking havoc all over the country, she feels sturdier than she did. Summer brings brilliant sun, a sky larger than it was when Gil first died, and meals filled with surprises from the vegetable garden. She's playing the Chopin nocturnes now, and Mendelssohn's Song Without Words. One night, as if it was the most natural thing in the world, Silman brings his book into the library near the piano instead of retreating upstairs. You don't mind, he asks tentatively, but she merely smiles and continues playing, amazed that she is so relaxed. She has always been shy of playing for anyone but the family. Still, she reasons with herself, Silman Lang has become family now that it is just the 2 of them together in their pod, which is a cocoon of contentment that it would be hard to explain to anybody, but which they both admit they feel with gratitude before they say goodnight. Then, around July 4th, the night they watch the fireworks from the death, sipping the cosmopolitan Silman has taught Vera to make, he starts to cough. And within days he has a fever, and now Vera is calling the hospital to alert them that he will need a wheelchair. I'm fine, he keeps insisting. Her answer is a quiet, you are not fine, and you are 76, and you have to be seen. The short ride to the hospital passes in silence. A numbness seems to have overtaken both of them. But when they get onto a bench waiting for a doctor to see Silman, it's as if Vera suddenly realizes how serious this is, and she turns to Silman to say, "This is a good hospital. You will be fine." "I know I'll be fine. The cough has disappeared," he reminds her. Then they are in the doctor's office, and the nurse says, "Why don't you sit here, Mrs. She looks at her clipboard to make sure she gets the name right. "Mrs. Lang." "Oh, no, we're not married," Vera says, and the woman stares at her and then looks pointedly at her ring. But Silman has started to chuckle, and Vera feels as if she's been plunged into water too deep to swim out of. As if from a great distance she hears him say, "Not yet, but that's what I'm counting on you to get. That's why I'm counting on you to get me better." Vera feels so confused that she knows she had better keep her mouth shut before she says something utterly foolish. When it is time to leave, because Silman will have to endure whatever awaits him alone, she removes her mask and bends over him and kisses him on the cheek and says, "I know you will get better." The nurse murmurs, "We'll do our best." Then, her heart clenching with fear, Vera tightens her mask and walks quickly back to her car.